right, we are rolling.
Yeah.
So Casey, why run for mayor?
I'm running for mayor because this is a defining moment for our city. And it's one where we have got to find ways to come back together to build a future for Seattle that every family sees a future in. One that is more affordable, one that's more equitable, and one that can show to our younger generation our ability to actually solve tough problems. We need to move beyond the gridlock. We got to move beyond the divisiveness and, really focus in on those things that we know have to get done. And I think this is our moment.
I've asked everybody who is running why they want to go through this, though, personally. It seems to be a thankless job right now in Seattle.
Being mayor is the hardest job in the city. I know, I've been deputy mayor for the past year, but at the same time, this is my home. This is where I grew up. It's where I'm raising 3 young kids, and I want their future to have as many opportunities as mine did when I was growing up here. And as tough as things are right now, and as hard as this past year has been, I believe in Seattle. I know that when we come together, we can solve tough problems. And, I've spent my entire career finding ways to bring folks together to do just that. And not sort of running from a problem, but looking straight at it and saying, how can I contribute to moving a solution forward?
You're the deputy mayor. How are you different than the current mayor?
Well, we have different life experiences, for one, and I think that's important because it means I bring a different lens to some of the issues that we've been working through for the past year. I think I have the great fortune that right now we've been able to move from, a bunch of, from shutting down much of the city to protect everyone from COVID, to now looking toward the future. And building a city that is more equitable and inclusive and thriving. And so I think I have a different set of tools that I'm going to be able to use to build that future for Seattle and work with folks to make it one that we all see a part of.
You've been the lead on homelessness from the mayor's office. As we get out of the pandemic, hopefully here in the next few months, it will most likely rise to the top again for voters in terms of the biggest issue in the city of Seattle right now. And since you've been handling it through the pandemic, the problem has only been exacerbated by it in terms of people can't go into shelters because of the risk of COVID. So how do you turn this around? How do you turn around what likely will be the biggest issue for people in the city?
Well, look, I can tell you, having worked on homelessness for the past year, that there's no quick fix. Yeah, if there were, we would have figured it out 20 years ago. We would have figured it out 10 years ago. But the fact is that last year we spent over almost $100 million more than we did just 2 years earlier, and it got worse. But I know that there are solutions. They're going to take time, but I think right now our opportunity involves a few things. Number one, we have to show that we can make visible progress on addressing homelessness across Seattle. And it starts by making sure our parks and our business districts are open and ready for business. It means adding more emergency shelter and opportunities for folks to come in off the street. But what's missing are permanent places for folks to transition to. So I'm going to be proposing that we work to build an additional 3,000 permanent homes for folks to move to. Start creating more of that capacity in our existing shelter system that we know can do more, that can serve more people as long as we can move folks through it.
But I've heard people say it's all about housing to cure the crisis of homelessness. There's a flip side to that, though, that there are businesses, people who are worried about economic recovery, who say that the tents that have taken over parks and sidewalks are a blight, that they're going to hurt the economic recovery of Seattle. So how do you balance those issues as well?
I don't think it's a balance because I think you can do both. I think that we have to be intentional in working with our providers and engaging individuals to get them out of parks. No one should be called a park to home. That park was not built for that intended purpose. We need to return it to what its use was, which is to be something that's open for all, for families and others to enjoy. And our businesses, you're right, they can't reopen if there are encampments outside of their business. We need to work to direct resources to those areas so that to help facilitate the return and reopening of our economy and supporting those small businesses that are all struggling, barely hanging on. We do that by being very intentional, by pairing that outreach with opportunities to come inside. And we're doing that right now. Miller Park is a great example of that, right? Miller Park, very large encampment. We led with outreach. We gave offers of shelter multiple times to individuals of that park. And in the end, we got more than 40 people inside, connected to shelter, on their way hopefully to breaking their cycle of homelessness, while also returning that park to the community to enjoy. It's possible, but it requires discipline, a strategy, and places to offer folks to come inside. We can do all of those things while we work as a region to solve the larger issue of homelessness. We can't make up for 20 years of broken systems and gaps in service, but we can do our part right now to have clear and open parks and businesses that can, and helping to support and facilitate the reopening of our businesses across the city.
So those units, the 3,000 or so units that you're talking about, how do you pay for that?
I think
and how quickly can they be built? Because that's the thing. People talk about housing. It's still a couple years, 3 years down the road before that actually happens.
Well, we have to make an investment today, start bringing those units online over the next few years. But the good thing is we have a ton of units in the pipeline now. And so it's a combination. My plan involves a few different pieces. Again, number one is making sure we have places to move folks from street into shelter. Two is building more permanent places for folks to move to, so we begin to have that throughput. Three, we got to reform the system. We got to get better performance out of the existing shelter systems. We have thousands of shelter units across the city, but we don't have enough people moving through it. That means we need to really work with our providers to get better performance out of that. Four, 40% of the people we served last year were not last housed in Seattle, right? If there wasn't a better data point to point to the fact that this is a regional challenge, it's just that. So we got to double down on a regional approach and making sure that all of our neighboring cities and communities are helping to support and solve this. And finally, first time in a long time, the feds and the state want to be partners. So I really do think that this is a moment where we can begin to bring all of that energy, all of those resources together and solve. But we can't wait to solve the whole thing without making near-term progress. And again, that starts with our parks and our business districts.
Did I see something about a tax increase that you're floating to pay for all this?
In terms of the new permanent supportive housing units, yeah, 3,000 units. It will be a bond measure that we send to the voters for an increase in property taxes in order to finance that.
In terms of policing, you've also been heavily involved in those talks at City Hall. Do you believe that more cuts can be made to the police department, or do you believe that the pendulum should swing back the other direction?
Look, I've been around public policy for a long time, and I think it's really important that before we get into arbitrary decisions about cuts or increases or this or that, we have to first land on what it is we're actually trying to accomplish. And what we're actually trying to accomplish is changing the way policing is done in this city and the way that we all think about public safety. That means we have to shift the culture of the Seattle Police Department. It means that we also need to engage in and scale up community-based resources that can step in and be part of the solution so we have less reasons for officers with weapons to respond. But it also means we have to right-size the force so we can continue to decrease our 911 crisis response times and shift to a micro-policing model for SPD that allows police to get out of their cars and start building relationships in the communities they serve. So to me, it's a both and. You can't just assume that you can turn on a dime and the future's here immediately. We have to work at it. We have to bring folks together to talk about it, to make sure that we are meeting the needs and expectations of all of our communities across Seattle.
So my last question for you, it's already getting some attention, especially when the rumor mill was circulating that you may think about running, the idea that you have this kind of DC lobbyist background and how that fits in to being a mayor. How does being a lobbyist in D.C. prepare you for being a mayor in Seattle?
You know, between working for Congressman Jim McDermott and Senator Patty Murray, I had the distinct honor to work for my tribe, for Cherokee Nation, and open our first DC office. It was an eye-opening experience for me and really showed me the power of advocacy and organizing, but also how important it is for, groups that have been historically marginalized, unheard, to have a seat at the table, to be engaged in decisions that affect them. After I left Senator Murray's office, I went into private practice for a little bit, and then I started my own company, where I worked with tribes, nonprofits, and others to, protect treaty rights, advance tribal sovereignty, advance environmental restoration, equal rights for trans Americans, things I'm very proud of. So it taught me, though, how to work with others. Throughout my time in Washington, D.C., Republicans were often in the majority in Congress. I couldn't just go home and hope that things were going to get done, that hope that legislation that we thought was important to serve Indian country was going to get over the finish line. I had to go and engage with people that I didn't always agree with, and I know they didn't agree with me. But to find common ground, find ways to relate with each other and move forward. That's the same thing I've been doing here back in the city. It's what I've done my whole life. Find ways to engage with folks, sit down, don't be afraid of somebody who has a difference of opinion than you, but find ways to be grounded in the things that you can agree on and build from there.
I think I went longer than 10 minutes.
Okay.
Apologies.
Well, that's fine.
All right. Yeah.
Good.
Anything else? Or?
No?
Got any follow-ups for me, or all good?
No, all good.